everyone here tonight. We are ready to begin our meeting. We have a special session at 5 o'clock. I will ask our clerk, Ms. Cobbins, to please call the roll.
A special session has been held on Thursday, February the 13th, 2014, at 5 o'clock p.m. in the fifth floor conference room regarding the Jail Population Committee report. Roll call. McKiernan. Mugia.
Here.
Maddox. Kane.
Here.
Markley.
Here.
Walters.
Here.
Philbrook.
Here.
Walker. Townsend.
Here.
Holland.
Here. All right, thank you very much. We have a number of distinguished guests before we move into our, and Commissioner Kane also. So, before we go into that, I have passed out a revised calendar for our conversations. As you know, this is a moving target because as things are available and as things are ready to move, you'll note that we have traded the 20th and the 27th agenda. That's going to be a common occurrence as we move through this. We're projecting the dates, but obviously there are things that are going to slide and move depending on other demands. So that's the only change on this revised, is that the schedule for the 20th and the 27th is reversed. So with that, we are going to address issues around the Jail Population Committee. I want to start by thanking Commissioner McKiernan and Commissioner Walters for agreeing to serve on behalf of the Commission on this committee and to learn more about it and to bring that to us. As we move into our budget session, we've accelerated our budget session, and so we wanted to make sure that we brought this important group before us, because if you look around the table on the other side at our guests, there's a lot of resources in the unified government attributed to our justice system, whether it's the courts, the district attorney's office, the sheriff, the police. Clearly, these are departments that we value, and we want to hear a report tonight about the Jail Population Committee. This group meets together on a regular basis to talk about issues around jail population and the costs therein. And so that's really the topic of conversation today. And so what I'm going to do is ask if each of you would go through and introduce yourself, and then I don't know who's going, and then we'll come back. And Sheriff, are you going to lead off?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so if we can just start over here, Mr. Gorman, and go through and just have each of you introduce yourself with your name and your title, so those in the room will know.
Well, good evening, everybody. Thank you for having us here. I'm Jerome Gorman, the District Attorney of 29th Judicial District, Wyandotte County.
Maurice Ryan, Administrative Judge, Municipal Court.
My name is Wayne Lamson. I'm the Chief District Judge here in Wyandotte County, 29th Judicial District.
Don Ash, Wyandotte County Sheriff.
Ellen Hanson, Interim Police Chief for Kansas City, Kansas, and recently retired from Lenexa Police Department, where in Johnson County we had a criminal justice coordinating committee that studied these same issues. So I'm not well versed on the Wyandotte County information, but on the basic premise. So glad to be here.
Thank you.
All right, Mayor, thank you. Commissioners, thank you this evening for giving this opportunity. We have a slide presentation to present for you. I'm going to see if the judge is going to get that up. I'm going to really endeavor to not read the slides to you. So you can look at the slides, and I'm going to go through a number of slides here and try to edify you. Mayor, I don't know how you want to handle questions. Do you all want to just raise questions when you have them? Do you want us to try to process through the presentation and save the questions for the end? What format would you prefer?
About how long do you anticipate the presentation?
I'm going to try to get through in about 10 or 12 minutes, and then Judge Lamson, I think, is going to pick up from there.
About 10, maybe a little less than that.
All right. I would
less
say
than
go
30
ahead and do
minutes.
your presentation. If we have some questions for the sheriff, we can address those, then we can move on and do each one in turn.
Okay.
That'd be
All right,
great.
Thank you. All right, next slide, please, Judge. There's the problem. You can look over the bullet points as a matter of background and information and history. The real problem is that we have more inmates in our custody than our jail can currently house on any given day. So for example, this morning, I think when I looked at the shift report, We had 469, I think, or 470 in custody. We had 117 of those farmed out, and we were housing around 350, or just under. Now, you'll see that seems to conflict a little bit with the bullet points there under capacity, but that's because due to our current staffing level, which we just graduated a deputy class and put some people to work in the jail at the 1st of February, that allows us to do some double bunking, which we'll talk about a little bit more in the presentation. And those of you that were on the commission back in 2010 will recall that we made a proposal to you to implement some double bunking in order to increase our capacity within our existing facility, within our existing structure. But the real problem is, in accordance with the last bullet there, the overcrowding situation has led to increased operating costs in a couple of ways, and we'll talk about that. Go ahead, Mo. Yeah. So some of the prior strategies that have been employed since the Jail Population Committee has been around and been in existence, it functioned, I believe, for a number of years, sometimes functioned better than at other times during those years. Then there was a period of time when the committee did not function, and then I sort of contacted my colleagues here after I came into office in 2009. We tried to resurrect it, if you will, and put it back to work. And we have done that, and we have been enjoyed a modicum of success within the constraints, that we operate under. But these are some of the strategies that have been employed. And I mentioned double bunking a little while ago. We have converted some of our cells in the detention center. We've added a second bunk to them, which allows us to put two inmates, two detainees in that cell versus one. We've tried where we could to increase efficiencies. For one example there, you see with regard to the meals, we had a contract with our vendor to provide 3 hot meals a day. We revised that and went to 2 hot meals a day and 1 cold meal, which reduced our overall cost for feeding the inmates. And we negotiated farm out rates. We shopped around the state of Kansas until we found rates that were more favorable and worked to help us reduce costs. And we have a slide that will illustrate that here in a little bit. Next slide, please. This is the historical perspective of farm out costs for the last decade or so, from 2003 through 2013. So you will see that it was very low a decade ago, and then about a half a decade ago it began to climb, where it reached its peak in 2009. And I alluded to 2010 earlier. It's when we made our proposal for double bunking and increasing staff and employing double bunking. You'll see immediately in 2011 and 2012 we reduced the cost significantly, and then in 2013 the cost went back up. In large part due to a couple of factors. One, we had a lot of inmates that we were holding, and you'll see another slide in a few minutes that talks about the average length of stay that inmates are in the jail. And the other was that we had an exceptionally high attrition rate in calendar year 2013. Our attrition rate has been roughly 1 a month. But for example, when the police department last year had their big class of 35, they took 7 from the sheriff's office, which was really good for the police department. But it sort of left us in a place where we were behind the curve in having applicants and processing and being able to immediately replace those people that we lost. And so we played from behind in the fourth quarter all during 2013. Now, next slide, please, Mo. There's our trend with respect to adult detention center bookings, once again, over that same period of time. You will see that from 2003, it's been mostly an upward trend till 2007, and then began to come down just slightly over the next couple of years. But then in 2010, 11, and 12, and 13, we've been flat over the last three full calendar years, 11, 12, and 13. And thank goodness the bookings went down in 2010 because we were in a pretty dire straits staffing-wise for at least into the third quarter of that budget year, 2010. But it looks like our trend is we've leveled out there at about 12,500 bookings per year over the last 3 years. We would call that flat, of course. Okay, Judge. However, the average length of stay is been sort of on the increase for quite some time, as you can see there. There have been times when there have been slight bumps back down and then back out. In the most recent years, what we believe we've done was through some of the efficiencies that this committee has helped put together and work on, is that we've been able to keep a lot of the people and move a lot of the people out of the jail that we're able to move, which means the ones we're unable to move end up staying longer because of the seriousness of their charge and a couple of other factors that we can talk about as well in a minute. You can see what they're coming to the jail for. If you'll read the chart from the bottom up, KCK bench warrants, KCK moving violations, and KCK writ of executions. These are things that process through the municipal court. And then I know the slide's sort of difficult to read there, but going up from there, you've got parole violations, and I think you can probably read the rest of them. So a lot of the people that end up staying in our jail are there for more than one reason. The police might have brought them in for a DUI, or they may have brought them in for a suspended driver's license or a simple misdemeanor ordinance violation, but they have a hold from another jurisdiction. They have a warrant from another jurisdiction or a hold, or they're also a parole violator, as you see on the slide there. And so they end up staying until they're processed from that. Number of them are contemptible, if you will. Judge Ryan can't get them to come to court, and he has to keep issuing those bench warrants, and then they get in contempt of other court orders. And so they're there for more than one reason. Next slide, Judge. This talks about how we classify inmates. And so think about the average length of stay now slide that showed you the ones that are there for now. Last year it was 15 days. They're maximum custody inmates. They're there because of the seriousness of their charge or the extent of their criminal history, or they're there for more than one reason. And because of that, they are maximum security inmates. Those are the folks that jail facility was built for.
So does that say 48%? I can't see the percentage on it.
I'll tell you, Commissioner, 48, that's correct.
Thank you.
48% of them. About 88 to 89% of the people that we end up keeping in the jail are there on presumptive prison charges, so they're not movable. We're going to have them until their case is resolved, okay? And so it's the other number that we're sort of able to work with there. Medium custody, and then the lowest group are our minimums, and then those that fall into the category of our inmate workers and so on and so forth.
What's
How
an
many
inmate worker?
workers do we have at any one time, Joe? About 28 or 30.
What's an inmate worker?
Those are the workers that assist us, Mayor, in the kitchen with food prep and service. They assist us in the laundry. They assist us in commissary, and as the inmates order their.
So they're inmates,
They're
but they
inmates.
work for you
Right.
inside the jail. Now, are they all minimum security?
Yes.
And And
Yes,
what's
they
the one below inmate worker? The category below the inmate worker next to the number 1.
Colonel Field, do you know? Yeah.
Okay.
I'm not sure.
Okay.
It could be, well, probably, it may have something to do with medical. May have something to do with medical status that,
I'll find
you
out.
know, that keeps them there.
That's a slide generated by the jail management system.
Okay.
Okay, now this slide gives us the inmate farm out cost, and this is a cost factor analysis there. What I'd particularly like you to draw your attention to as you look through that and you look over it, first of all, there's some pretty big numbers up there in respect to the total farm out jail days, the total farm out housing cost. But if you look in the second column from the right, the change in farm out ADP from the prior year, and if you'll recall those slides that the bar chart that showed you the overall cost, if you'll look there in 2011, 2012, where we were able to reduce that cost pretty significantly, that was a correlation due to the fact that we added staff and we employed the double bunking plan that we presented to you. And so that explains those reductions there. And the only years that you see really at least significant reductions. The other years could have been because, you know, the number was high to begin with and it just didn't come down very far. But those 2 years were significant cost reductions.
And Chief, does the total farm out, it says total farm out housing costs, that's just what we're paying in our contracts. Does that factor in transportation and staff time to transport?
All of the jails or facilities that we farm out to provide transport for us because we do not have, essentially we do not have a transport section. We have 2 deputies dedicated to out-of-county transports, and they may go all over the United States, you know, to pick up an inmate or transport inmates. The farm out facilities, we pay for that. That's
Built into the cost we see on here.
That's
So there's
built
not an
into the cost
additional
you see.
cost to farm out that's not on the slide.
Correct.
Thank you. Okay.
Okay, and my last slide there. So, here just gives you sort of a snapshot of the cost and how we can mitigate them or how we can reduce them, one way that we can do it. The other thing, other than the overcrowding, and we house too many in our facility, won't house that many, and we're farming them out, is our current overtime pattern. Each of the deputies, and we are authorized for 103 deputies. We don't have 103 deputies. I think we currently have like 97, 96. And the 10 sergeants, we broke out their average salary. They are scheduled because of the 12-hour shift pattern that we're on. They are scheduled in their work schedule 24 hours a month on overtime. Obviously, they made the decision to go to 12-hour shifts before I got here, but the decision was made based on there was not enough adequate manpower to fund 3 8-hour shifts or a 40-hour work week. And when that number got so low, they had to resort to going to 2 shifts in order to be able to staff enough people on any one of those shifts to be able to run the facility, to be able to operate the facility. So that annual cost of overtime, if we were full, as you can see, is almost $1 million there. Well, that cost would essentially fund 19 deputy positions. With those additional deputy positions, we could employ more double bunking. We could fully double bunk the facility to the capacity we feel is safe and appropriate, which would be somewhere in the neighborhood of around 400 or possibly a few more inmates. And that farm out cost would significantly drop there. So I'm going to turn it over now to the judge unless you have any specific questions about any of the slides that I went over. And the judge is going to talk about some other alternatives.
Commissioner Philbrook.
I just have one, so how many double bunk,
Microphone, please, for the broadcast.
sorry, how many double bunked rooms are there now?
I think we currently have 3 housing units that are double bunked, and that probably represents a little over 120 beds, or not quite?
78 per housing unit.
Okay, and so there's really,
That would increase our capacity to 78 per housing unit, but that's not 70, or is that 78 double bunks?
That's 78 total bunks per housing unit versus 52 normal.
Right.
And there's 2 staff, there's 1 that's non-staff.
So it's about 75 or a little more than 75 additional bunks.
so how many more can you do then? If you,
We probably could do 2 more housing units, maybe 3. At 3, we'd probably need to talk about additional staff.
and so that would double the bed capacity in those 3 housing units if you can. And so what would that make it then? Of additional? Because I don't,
Population, if we don't bump the whole,
just the
I
difference.
think we may have that, Commissioner, I think we may have that on another slide here that we're gonna get
We
to.
have a slide that
Oh,
I think
do
is
ya?
gonna address that concern
Thank
in
you.
just a minute.
Yeah.
It's close anyway.
Okay, thank you. Yes, I was just trying to get a picture of the numbers on that. Thank you very much.
Do you, I hope, do you have a cost for the cost per day of an inmate?
To farm out,
No, yes, and a rate to keep in-house.
our total fixed cost for housing an inmate in our facility is about $90 a day,
$90 a day, and how much is your farm-out cost per day?
$50 a day. But if you double bunk that inmate, now you're paying just a marginal cost, okay? Those of you think back to your economics classes now, all right? That $50 is an additional full cost to pay somebody else to house that inmate. If I can put him in a double bunk, we have calculated that marginal cost to be somewhere around the area of $8 to $10 a day, $9 to $10 a day. If we double bunk him, it costs $50 a day to house him outside. And here's the thing, we're gonna house him one way or the other.
Now, are there restrictions on who we can send out to farm out?
There are some, Mayor, based on their classification, based on their mental health history, their special needs, if they're a special management inmate, we try to maintain all of those in-house and farm out the easier inmates to the farm out facility.
So here's kind of a potentially a naive question, but if it costs $90 to keep them in-house and only $50 to farm them out, from a simplistic view, would it make more sense to farm out as many as we could to reduce our costs?
Your fixed costs are gonna remain somewhere to run the jail and have the jail open. Those fixed costs are gonna remain, okay?
So even if you have fewer inmates, you don't save $90 per, right? The cost per inmate would actually go up of the ones you do house. Is that what you're saying?
Precisely. So if we can maximize fixed costs, I know this is economics, all right, 101 stuff, think about it. If we can maximize those fixed costs, because we're gonna have those fixed costs anyway. If we're not maximizing those fixed costs, we're not efficient.
Okay.
Okay? So if we can maximize those fixed costs and then house at a marginal cost, that's where the cost reduction is.
And that's important for us to hear, because looking at it, it's important to know that there's not a silver bullet here, as it were, where if you just did this, then it would fix it.
Exactly.
You have fixed costs, so it's really a sliding scale in terms of how much money you actually save in any solution that we have. So, and it's balancing those different demands.
We need to keep working, I think, till we find that balance. That's what I refer to as a sweet spot. Once we get to that sweet spot, then we'll be as efficient as we can be, given the limitations that we have.
Okay. Commissioner Murguia, microphone please for Commissioner Murguia.
So, Sheriff, is the jail always overcrowded or on the verge of being overcrowded?
It's always overcrowded.
It's always overcrowded.
Yes.
Okay. All right. I was just hoping that it wasn't always like that, and if there was a way for us to hold people in charge for that, that'd be another way to offset our costs. But
I have that dream several nights, hoping I'll wake up and it'll be that way, but it hasn't happened yet.
All right.
Thank you. Okay, if nothing else for the sheriff, we'll move on to Judge
Thank you.
Lamson.
I get to do the second part, and I think as you would already have identified, Commissioners and Mayor, the issues surrounding the operation of the jail are complex. They're really interrelated between the DA's office and the police department and the sheriff's office, because what one department does or doesn't do impacts the others as we go through this. So in looking at trying to make a presentation to you this evening, we have talked about a number of things, and we kind of decided that rather than overwhelm you with historical facts and all that information, we would give you what we think are the best short-term recommendations and then also a long-term recommendation for your consideration. And really the goal in all of these, particularly the first two, is to have the maximum impact on that $2.7 million that we spent last year for farm outs. To answer your question, Commissioner McGee, the jail was opened in 1989 and was overcrowded by the end of that year. So it's always been that situation since we opened it up. We have set out here we have two short-term solution or select recommendations to you, and then we have a long-term one. Go to the next slide, I think. Our first recommendation is to suggest to you that you should consider enhancing our pretrial house arrest program. For those of you who have no idea what they do, they basically screen all the inmates, and then they have the possibility to release them on a bond that is where they are either supervised or in some cases they are put on a house arrest machine, ankle bracelet. One of the real difficulties that we've experienced in looking at which ones we can put on there and can we feel safe to the public about having them out of the jail on one of these programs is that currently we don't have sufficient staff to monitor them 24/7. And while, as the sheriff indicated, there are certain classifications we are okay, the guy's never been in trouble before and he's a good guy other than he had one mistake, well, okay, those are pretty no-brainers. But if they're more severe crimes, or they've got mental issues, or they got holds other places, as a judge, I have some reservations on putting some individuals out. We are proposing to you that reservation would be addressed in large part if we enhance that department. We are suggesting 5 additional employees. We have set out there an estimated cost of their salary of $250,000 a year. There would be some startup costs, and we really didn't put a figure to that. I know that Jerry's office, Mr. Gorman's office, just put a diversion office together, and their startup costs were around $6,500. And so maybe that's a figure you could put in there as being those startup costs. I don't know. We do believe that if you add those employees, and we've looked at the jail population on more than one occasion, we do believe that we could impact at least 25 additional prisoners through their programs, putting them out in their home or into some type of a place on a machine or east under monitoring. They will have to feed themselves, so that cost goes away. We don't have to do their medical, so that goes away. And it reduces that farm out number, that amount, saving $50 a day per inmate. And we calculate that in 1 year, that it'll be savings to the government of $250,000. Now that's about 10% of our current farm out costs. Secondly, and the sheriff kind of alluded to this, our second short-term solution is suggesting to you that if we could take what he spends currently on overtime and use that to increase staffing in the jail, the 19 that he spoke of, we can double bunk 60 additional inmates. Commissioner, that was the number you think you were asking about.
Thank you.
okay? That'll result in savings in a 12-month period of about $1.1 million. So between the two programs, the two short-term programs, we're suggesting that we're really, in this case, we're really not adding any additional money. We're moving money from overtime to additional staff. And we're bringing that many prisoners home, 60 a day, or we believe that'd be a close estimate. Now that would entail double bunking in a number of areas that we're not currently doing, so there would be that shifting around. But I think the sheriff's office is set up to do that, or would be by the time they got these staff on board.
Yes.
Between the two, as I said, that'd be $1.1 million on the one program and $250,000 on the other. That's a significant hit on that 2.7. It cuts it down. It doesn't do away with it at this point in time, but it gets closer to that sweet spot that the sheriff spoke of. The last solution, or the last recommendation we were thinking about proposing to you, and this is not necessarily a new idea, but it's certainly one that we believe should be looked at again, and that is bringing in a facilitator, an external third party, to put some of this group together, some of the commissioners together, others in the community. What do we want to do? There are a number of programs that's been talked about. Our juvenile detention facility is in this jail, so we're housing juveniles in a maximum security facility. Could we move those juveniles out at a cheaper amount? Where would we put that facility? What would it cost? Some of those things have been talked about, but never really fleshed out for your consideration. Minimum security booking in, DUIs. Right now, we book them in, and we put them in a maximum security facility. Do we need to have the first-time misdemeanor DUI? State says we have to keep him in jail for 48 hours. Do we want to put him in this jail, or could some other kind of location be better suited for that? We're looking at processing both in the courts. Are there ways we could process cases faster? There's lots of issues that go along with that. Recently, mental health treatment facilities have been brought up, and whether or not that should be expanded or not expanded, or where do we do that, I think there might be vast differences of opinion among all of us, but I think it's something that should be explored. A significant number of our people in our jail have all kinds of mental problems.
Is that percentage between 30 and 40%?
Yes, I would guess it's
Closer to 40, Mayor.
closer to the 40, Mayor. So all we're suggesting is, and once again, this is not a short-term solution, but certainly I think we need as a group to have an idea, our plan over the next 5 years. The costs in our jail have not gone down, and they're not going to go down overall. I mean, we're still going to have a number of individuals that we have to lock up. We have some people in the jail that need to be locked up. They're where they ought to be. But we need to try to figure out, is that the most economic and safe way of doing it? So that's our recommendations, and these really are not mine. These come from the population group as a whole. We are on the one before on pretrial services and the house arrest program. We are suggesting to you, currently it is under community corrections. And Brenda Leiker, who runs that department, does a wonderful job. And so none of that are recommendations, but we think that that department should be put either under the district court or under the administrator and not under community corrections. Not to say that any of those folks are bad folks, but the thrust of community corrections is post-sentencing. It's a state organization. It deals with post-conviction. This department really deals with getting people out before they get to trial. Okay. And so the thrust, we believe, would be better suited, more efficiency would be gained if it would be, but that would certainly be a call for the commission to at least consider, and that's why we put it out there.
Commissioner Kane.
Thank you, Mayor. This goes right in line, Judge Lamson, to what we talked about in the last budget, that we need an outside firm to come in and tell us the mistakes that we're making. And the reason I think it needs to be outside person, because they're going to be more objective, and sometimes if we do it ourselves, we're going to say, well, this is okay and that's not, because we're going to prioritize what we think is important. So, and when we were talking about fire stations the other day, I guess it was this week, you know, I think this is something that we need to add on to the list of things that need to be done. And we also have to prioritize that list. And then we're gonna need some help for those that are mentally ill, because I don't know how to fix that.
Commissioner Walters?
I'd second a lot of what Commissioner Kane said. I'd put it a little differently, though. I think we see a lot of advantage in having a third-party analysis, not to identify mistakes that we're making, but bring to us ideas and best practices from a broader perspective and environment than we get by dealing with these same issues every day. I think, you know, Brian and I have been participating recently. I think I can speak for him in saying that we are impressed with how much energy is given to trying to address these issues by these folks that are here presenting this afternoon. I think, in general, I think you would agree that we're here because we've sort of been reacting to situations for the past 30 years.
Yes.
We built the county jail, the city jail closed. Well, let's just move over to the county jail. I think there are a lot of opportunities for improvement. In the perfect world, we would not have juveniles and minimum security prisoners in this kind of a maximum security environment. And that's not something I think we may be able to analyze strictly on a dollar and cent return basis. I think we have to think longer term about the impact to our overall city and county when we go down those sorts of paths. So I think there's a lot of opportunities for some creative thinking and some long-term solutions, and now's a great time to do it. Thank you.
Commissioner Walker?
Is there anything different about what you're presenting today than 20 years ago? When you were in my office,
20 years ago, we couldn't double bunk, Commissioner, because the jail federal standards for jails at that time prohibited it. That's been modified and changed, and so that's why we went to the double bunking and why we're suggesting that be even enhanced now. It's always been talked about that our pretrial program, not only here but in other jurisdictions as well, is one of the best ways to deal with those inmates that you can get out and feel comfortable in doing so. There are some individuals that no one's going to let them out on that program. You wouldn't, and neither am I. But
right,
there's others that might be able to be done. If I know they're going to be locked in their home and they're not going to be able to run the street and they're going to be where we can find them at any point in time, am I okay in telling you as a citizen that maybe we're covered there?
well, I'm old school. I don't believe in programs. I believe in jail. Every day they're in jail. They're not out amongst us committing whatever they've learned as their particular behavior. How suitable do you think the jail is to add 2 additional floors to that facility? Is it still, was that just talk, or is that a realistic alternative?
Commissioner, according to the professionals at J.E. Dunn, it was constructed and it was pre-built. Those pylons, or whatever the correct engineering term is, are buried in the ground over there and ready to go to add, 2 additional floors to the existing facility.
So we're paying $2.7 million a year to farm out. What do you think the cost of funding bonds to build 2 additional floors would be? Do you have any idea?
No.
Not really.
Well,
We have not been
I don't
provided that cost.
either, but it can't be much more than what we're paying on farm outs now. We have purchased nearly all the property across the street on Barnett with the intention at that time, because I was there, that we would build an additional facility there. a juvenile facility, a minimum security facility. There's 7 or 8 houses. I believe the condemnation law still allows us to take that property without the legislature's approval for the construction of a facility, which would be in proximity to the courts and the facility. Do we have a problem with the judges, Judge Lamson, in, you know, the idea that, well, we're going to sentence this guy to jail, and they don't quite understand that as a judge, being independent and all, that there is a cost factor? Are they sentencing people to jail that don't need to be sentenced to jail? Just because that's the easiest thing to do politically?
Some, maybe. I don't know that that's an overwhelming trend. I think there's a couple of the judges that probably have the same philosophy that you do, Commissioner, that jail is where they ought to be.
Yeah, well, that's my philosophy, and make no mistake about it. I don't believe in programs and rehabilitation. I don't think that ever happens. I think what happens is you go to jail, and after 6 months, 8 months, a year in jail, if you're going to rehabilitate, you're going to rehabilitate, because that is no fun place to be.
Much of
Walker, if I might expand on what you asked Judge Lamson, I think very few of our misdemeanor cases, because those are the ones that are going to spend the time in that jail, serve their sentence in the jail. The felony sentences get shipped to the Kansas Department of Corrections.
That's another question I have, and you might answer that while you're speaking. How long now is it that the state has to come down and pick up those prisoners?
I think Colonel Fuel will know that, maybe. At a certain point, they have to start paying. If they don't pick them up at a certain time, I don't know that.
When I retired, I was told that it was 6 months that they had up to 6 months to come get a prisoner that had been sentenced to the state corrections facility. Is that still the case?
I've not heard that 6-month figure before. I believe it to be much less than that. They certainly don't take that amount of time generally to pick them up.
As soon as the paperwork's done, and that usually occurs within 9 days, according to D.A. Gorman's recent check on that, we ship them, we schedule them and we ship them as soon as the Department of Corrections says they'll take them. That's usually within a few weeks.
The point I wanted to make, sorry.
Good.
The point I
Go
wanted to
ahead.
make on that is that there's very few people in this jail that are serving misdemeanor sentences, at least district court misdemeanor sentences. They might be serving misdemeanor sentences from Judge Ryan's municipal court, but there's very few that are serving misdemeanor sentences. The DUIs are probably one area where that's an exception.
Commissioner Kane.
Well, this would, Commissioner Walker, this would go into the study. If they don't, when we bring somebody in, and you're right, the Duns can build anything on top of anything, but the study would say, okay, you would be better off if you went across the street where you're talking about, or if you went up. And I'm a firm believer that study needs to get started now, not later. And like I said, prioritize, this might be one of the ones that we want at the top, because we're losing more money doing this than anything else.
Well,
It's hard for me to believe that at 2.7 million, we can't build 2 additional floors for a cheap bonded amount of money and put them in there than to farm them out.
Oh, I don't disagree with you. I agree 100%. But we don't have the knowledge to say how much it costs.
Well, you would think at this point in time that somebody, after paying out this kind of money over all these years, and I've been here as a staff member witnessing this, that somebody would have figured out how much it costs to bond out 2 additional floors versus what we're paying out.
I think one of the, a couple of the issues that you've raised, I think, are very important to understand the complexity of this issue. Number one, we have our juveniles in a maximum security prison. I think that's unethical, and I think it's financially not feasible. There may be a handful of juveniles once in a while who belong in a maximum security prison, but it's not very many of them. And I certainly believe in rehabilitation for our juvenile offenders. And I don't believe just locking up our kids and teaching them a prison culture is going to move our community forward in the long run. I think the look that we need to do is looking at another facility that is a minimum security facility in nature, that includes a juvenile facility that focuses on education and rehab, so our kids aren't falling behind in school. I know the school comes into our jail to teach the kids right now. But to have a facility for our juveniles where kids can get turned around and can have some counseling and some mental health treatment and some family work done to help get them back on track, I think that's a long-term benefit to our community, because we know that kids in juvenile who begin the career path of criminal start young and they stay late. And we need to find a way to intercept that. I think moving the juveniles to a minimum facility, minimum security facility is going to do two things. One, it's better for the kids. It's less expensive to run, and it frees up our prison for prisoners. We can go in and we can double bunk the juvenile pod, and we could bring farm out back into that facility. The other piece is, you mentioned it about your bench warrant people that end up in jail because of bench warrants. And Judge Ryan, I'd be interested to know how many of them, talk through that, how many of them are violent criminals that go into that? Could they be housed in a minimum security facility?
Most of them can be housed in a minimum security facility. The people that get arrested on warrants and are booked into the jail, generally speaking, they have at least one violation that has a bond of a minimum of $1,000. The current policy of the police department is that unless they have a bond of at least $1,000 on any one ticket, the police officers are to issue a failure to appear citation, give the person a new court date, and then they are supposed to come to court 2 or 3, 4 weeks later. So the people that are being arrested, number one, owe us at least $1,000 on any one ticket. Most of them are minimum security. Vast majority have mental health issues, because if they have, let's just face it, I kick out a lot of people. For example, this last, we forfeit in bonds. People that pay bonds to get people out of jail, we forfeit on the average of $600,000 a year up until this last year, and now we're down to about 4.2. And that's because I purposefully OR'd or granted signature bonds to people to reduce overcrowding in the jail. So when I'm letting them loose from the jail, they're not posting bonds, and we don't get that money on the back end, but they're out of the jail, and the sheriff is saving money. But for the most part, they're not really violent. There are some that are, but all of them are frequent flyers. No one goes to jail with just 1 or 2 tickets. All of them have 7, 8, 9, 10 tickets.
Well, and one of the issues, and particularly with the mental illness piece, that we find, and there are a number of layers to this, once they go to jail, they lose their state and federal benefits. And so we have to provide their medical care, which means their mental health care, which means we have to provide their medications and their mental health services in jail, which should be paid by the state or federal government. But when they come into our jail, that becomes our cost. So the mental health piece is not only the cost of feeding and bunking, it's also the very expensive cost of medication. And you've said nearly 40% of our inmates are on psychotropic drugs, some of the most expensive drugs out there. And so we are required by law to provide that. Any of the mental health folks that we can divert back into treatment, because a lot of times what happens, they get a ticket for disorderly conduct, they don't show up 7 times, a warrant is issued, they're not on their meds, and they're not in contact with their caseworker, and they go back, they end up in jail. Where they need to end up is in a mental health center where they can get back on their meds, get back connected to their caseworker, get back housed if they've lost their housing, and work towards a solution that's going to keep them in the community. At the end of the day, that's less expensive. It's not only the right thing to do, but it's less expensive. And we're not warehousing the mentally ill in our jails. This is not a problem in Wyandotte County. This is a problem nationwide. When the federal government and the states made a decision in the 1980s to close our mental health facilities, they did not come up with a solution. They just closed the mental health facilities. And so now we have people trying to make it on their own, and they're ending up in our jails. So any money we can spend towards a mental health solution and a minimum security place where they can get mental health services and get them back on track, that's a big move forward. I would like to see a study that would show how the total operations, a comprehensive study of total operations. I would like, before the budget gets here, if you all could get us a cost estimate on a comprehensive study to look at our facilities, our jail facilities and management, which would include looking at sites and different options, whether it's building 2 more stories on top of our current jail, Commissioner, or whether it's building a separate facility, minimum security and juvenile, or both, to look at those total costs so we can start making a long-range plan, so we don't have to keep, so we can start working on a solution rather than just wringing our hands at the very expensive problem that we have right now. Commissioner Walker.
My wife spent 30 years in adolescent mental health. Some of you know her, worked with her, or at least we had associations through our professional connection. And in those 30 years, she worked at virtually every mental health hospital in the metropolitan area, as one after another closed because they were non-profitable. She entered her career at Crittenden. Anybody who is a juvenile who has got any moxie will feign a suicide. I'm going to kill myself. So what happens is the sheriff of that particular county, and I'm talking metropolitan, not just Don or anybody else, once that juvenile feigns a psychiatric event, sends them to Crittenden. So 9 out of 10 of the people that were in the mental health facility at Crittenden were nothing more than sophisticated criminals. And those sophisticated criminals were allowed to stay in a mental health facility as long as a judge allowed them to stay, because it was easier to keep them there and cheaper to keep them there than it was to keep them in the jail. Now, I know that for a fact, not because of my personal experience, but I had to hear it every night when my wife came home about a murderer or a rapist or a pedophile that got put in their facility because he was going to kill himself in the jail. We try a lot of juveniles as adults. Saying the word mental illness, to me, is like saying, hey, they're all mentally ill, or they would behave normally. The test is not whether they're mentally ill, it's whether they know right from wrong. That's the guiding criteria in this state. Has been, and will continue to be, and will always be. So I guess I'm very vehement about the fact that, yeah, these guys are mentally ill. These juveniles are mentally ill. They've come from bad environments. They've been abused. It's too bad. But the bottom line is, every day that they are in a facility, a correctional facility, is a day that they are not out there raping, robbing, stealing, doing the various things that they do. So I have no sympathy with this issue of mental illness. If they are truly mentally ill where they don't know right from wrong, that's different. You know, being bipolar doesn't make you justify a criminal act. Bipolar people know right from wrong. If they're schizophrenic, maybe they do, maybe they don't. I could go through the whole litany of events. How many juveniles do you try as adults?
It's not that large of a number. We probably waive a dozen a year. We file 600 charges against juveniles in a year. 40% of those are felonies, 60% are misdemeanor.
Could you waive more?
Well, we could attempt to waive more. It'd be up to the district court. It's not our decision. It'd be the juvenile judge.
I understand.
We could attempt to waive more. Right now, we do it on a basis of the severity of their crime. There's 8 factors with that the law says we have to consider.
I'm aware of those 8 factors.
And we also base it upon what we feel the district court will go along with.
Well, to me, the bottom line with most of these juveniles is there is a percentage that are salvageable. There is probably a great middle that could go either way. And I have always believed that there are more of them that should be waived as juveniles and put into the criminal system than we actually do. Murderers, yeah, if you're a murderer, there's a good chance you're gonna be waived. If there's a serial criminal of some sort, we waive them. But we don't waive enough of them because we don't have the space for them. There is always this cost of incarceration that seems to drive justice. And I don't have necessarily the answer, but I'm going to tell you, the bottom line is that every day a criminal is in jail. That's why I oppose parole centers. We've got this issue with the parole center. Parole means they haven't served their full sentence. They haven't paid their full debt to the system, and they let them go because they've been, making nice in prison. And the bottom line is that they're out there. They're amongst us, as someone said in the paper. They're out, the Department of Corrections, they're out there amongst us anyway, so why do we care where they put a parole center? Bottom line is, most of them are out there before they deserve to be out there. And I am not an advocate of programmatic rehabilitation. And I've obviously made that very clear here tonight, and
Well, you certainly have.
I am 100% for building more jails, more prisons. If the state said to me, I'm gonna raise your tax 100% on the state portion to build more prisons, I'd vote for it time after time after time. They don't belong amongst people who obey the rules.
Commissioner Philbrook?
Okay, so I'm totally gonna change the subject.
Oh, no.
Oh, amen, brother, I am, right this minute. So here's my question for you. When you're talking about computers, all right, those computers and those new programs, are you talking about making those interface the DA's office and with our municipal court? So they can be in contact along with, so everybody knows who's had a warrant paid, and we don't have people accidentally picked up and put in jail that we have to pay to put them in jail for no reason.
Commissioner, I can tell you that the current court management software that we do have, we have to build an interface. We have built an interface with the Kansas Department of Revenue to submit our traffic violations for suspension determination. Starting July 1st, we have to interface with the Kansas Bureau of Investigation to submit adult disposition forms. We have requested in the past money to interface with the jail computer, because the way we do things now is we have a separate computer in the judges' chambers. When we as judges see a defendant in jail, our staff enters the information into the jail computer, and then they have to go back to their desk and enter it into our computer. So that's our next step. And then the next step after that is the state runs off of a computer system called Full Court. And I don't know how much it's going to cost to interface with it. Generally speaking, though, I can tell you that Regis, which runs our criminal information system, they're hesitant to let anybody interface with them. They demand on building it so it won't corrupt their data. I imagine the Full Court people are feeling the same way about the state data, so I don't know how you get around that. But we would love to put it in the budget. I will put it in the budget, and it's up to the commissioners to decide whether or not they want to fund it.
Well, if you would balance it out like you have the rest of your presentation on how much money that could help save us, give us an idea, a little bit of a relationship, plus how much less time
Right.
It will take our folks in hours of work, just a guesstimate. That would be a little helpful.
Commissioner, I think I can tell you that the state's not gonna let the city hook into theirs to the full court. At
Okay.
least not now. They have denied Wichita doing that, and they've denied Overland Park doing that. So unless they treat us differently than they did those two entities. Now, there is a whole bunch of change that system statewide. Our full court is not us, it's a statewide district court system. There may be a change on that coming down the pike in the next couple of years, and that may change. But I can
Okay.
tell you, if we made that request tomorrow, I can tell you what the answer would be.
Okay.
Now, that doesn't do away with what Judge Ryan was talking about on the other systems, because that's completely different. But I know that's not quite what you wanted to hear, but that's kind of where it's at.
No, I just want to hear what it is.
Well, Commissioner, kind of in line with what Judge Lamson was saying, their system called Full Court, when they implemented that back in about '06, somewhere in there, the same time our office was looking at, we had never had a case management system. We looked at several of them, including the complement to Full Court for prosecutors called Full Case. We didn't go with it at the time because it was just being developed. And as a matter of fact, it's not developed for a particular office. It's developed statewide, and they told us, we said, well, what if we want to make it so that it works for our office this way? And they says, well, as long as you get the other offices in the state to agree, then we'll do it. We didn't think that was a good way for us to operate our large office with all the small ones. So a few years passed, a year or so passed down the line, I should say, and we had money as part of our budget when we bought our system, New Dawn, which is what municipal court had until recently. We've been operating ours since '06. We asked the state people to interface with them. We thought it would be, and I still think it would be a lot of value, because we could do all our electronic filing and all that through them, and they told us no. And I believe at the time they told us no because when we were going to pay for the interface, was that they were still upset that we didn't buy for $250,000 their entire system. So I think we're fighting that battle. We have a battle, I should say a battle, we do have an interesting situation right now, is that the police department is researching for a new case management system. I don't know how far along exactly they are, but one of the things I've asked to meet with Captain Parisi about is, will it be able to interface with our system? That way the police can complete their case, their investigation, instead of printing out a little paper like they're doing now and bringing it to us, they could hit a button and send it to us. So he and I have scheduled a meeting for next week to investigate that.
Thank you for doing that.
Commissioner Murguia.
Thanks, Mayor. I just want to tell you, Sheriff Ash, I work a lot with you on different things, and I talk to you a lot about different ideas. I just can't tell you enough. You do just a phenomenal, fantastic job with our jail. I mean it. Every time you give a presentation, it is very easy for me to understand, and I have by no means ever run a prison. So I would have no idea what that's like, but it's very easy to understand. I have great appreciation for efficiency, as all the commissioners around here can tell you, and the mayor. So I just think you do an amazing job, and all of the rest of you putting this presentation together. I don't work as often with you, but I think you guys have done a fantastic job here, seriously. I just have a couple of follow-up questions, okay? So the first one is, Mayor, I don't know if you remember, we did an Amnesty Day a few years ago. I don't know that anybody else was on the commission. Were you on the commission, Commissioner Merkley? Well, I know it was while Mayor Reardon was, and Commissioner Kane, I know it was while Mayor Reardon, sorry. While Mayor Reardon was in office, we tried an Amnesty Day to let people come in and clean up their tickets. Do you remember what I'm talking about? Okay. I regret not ever hearing any follow-up on that.
We did.
We did?
Yeah, we got a report back.
Okay. Was it impactful? Was it helpful?
I can tell you that the original impetus for it was to help people clear up tickets so they could get their driver's licenses and get jobs. And I think that I can tell you that we cleared enough tickets that 25 people got their licenses back. So in that
Okay.
respect, it wasn't a great success. Over the 3-day period, we collected, I'm going to say an average of $110,000 a day. I'll be honest with you, I can't remember the exact figures. We collected a substantial amount, but at the same time, we didn't get that money later on down the road. And my philosophy has always been, once I make a decision and impose a fine, I don't really care. I care that people pay their fines and pay their debts to society, but it's the city's money. If the commissioners want to do an amnesty and realize that they'll get more money here, but they'll lose it here, that's the commission's decision. And I really don't, that's their decision. Generally speaking, amnesties occur best infrequently, without warning, so that people don't get the idea they can hold off and just take care of tickets every 2 or 3 years.
Okay, so you do believe in general, if used appropriately, they can be effective?
It can be effective. It provides a short-term boost in income, and it does help some people clear up their tickets. Last time we did it in October. It was over the course of 3 days, and if you would like, I can see if I can get those facts and figures again and dig them out. I know I provided them to Edwin Birch at one time, but we can show you what we did during that period.
Really, I'm more concerned about your, those of you that deal with this on a regular basis, your professional opinion. Because you can show me numbers and I can think this is great, but I guess you deal with it all the time, so your opinion is probably more important to me than me reviewing some numbers on my own. But I appreciate your willingness to do that. The other question I have is, I'm just curious. Sometimes I can remember Mayor Reardon saying one time, one of our biggest faults in Wyandotte County is we don't dream big enough. And so I'm just curious, if you had a lot of money to spend on helping deal with this issue, would you invest that in programs? Would you invest that in a jail or multiple jails or whatever, or a combination or something totally different? I'm just curious what your professional experience has been.
I personally believe there has to be a quality mix of that, Commissioner. I disagree with Hal on that programs have no effect, because I see the same ones come back again and again and again. I lock him up, but he didn't learn anything at all. Now, if I can get him in a program that he gets off of his drugs, and a lot of these are drug. We have people that report to Miss Liker's bunch that they may test positive for meth 3 days after I put them out. And sometimes I bring them back in for a week, and then I see, can you get into a program? I have had some success of getting him into programs, and then 6 months later, when I actually sentence him, he's not on meth no more. And then he has a potential of making probation and successfully doing it. But I think I agree with Commissioner Walker that we do have to have sufficient jail size to handle our need. And our need isn't going to get any less. I don't think we have the people in our community committing less crimes. I think they're committing more crimes. Now, they may be less serious crimes, and the police department's records indicate some of that in the last year or so. But I think if Tulsa, Oklahoma built more jails, and they found they had to enhance their pretrial programs, or they filled them up within about 6 months, and they were right back where they were. So if you don't have a combination of the two in some ratio, then that's my thoughts. Now, I respect other positions as well.
That's great. I'd really like to hear from everybody. Thank you, Judge.
Commissioner, my opinion on that would be that I think that we need to get the juvenile facility out of where it is. It wasn't, they modified the jail to fit that, but that wasn't the original plan, was that the juveniles go into that facility. We could do a lot better with the space as adult facility and have the juveniles outside of that in an appropriate facility for them. So that would be my biggest thing on the wish list. As far as programs, generally I don't believe in a lot of programs. I agree with Judge Lamson that the largest percentage of our people, I think 40% of the cases we file are drug cases. Of the other 60, a lot of those have a drug problem. But we've done some drug programs such as drug court, and in my opinion, they're not that successful. I think at one point, we went for a year and a half before we graduated somebody from it. So I'm not a big believer in drug court at all. I would be a believer in doing some programs for mental health that would keep, and if you notice the early slides, if you remember, Sheriff Ash said that we book 12,500 people a year into the jail. While a majority of those who stay long-term are mine and Judge Lamson's problems in district court, I think it's 85% of them are municipal court bookings. And those are where the mental health problems primarily lie. If we could do something in mental health to keep those 10,000 or 8,500, whatever that is, out of there, that certainly would help with reduce our bookings and help our average length of stay reduced.
I think the best solution probably lies in continuing to look at it with a systemic eye. Take a systemic approach. I think it's going to require your consultants. I think it's going to require your consultants to come in to get down into the weeds with all of us up here, some of you as well, and then say, okay, and not just in this business, but what's going on in Wyandotte County generally, what's going on in Kansas City, Kansas generally. What's the census information telling us? Is the population in the offender group growing, shrinking? I personally believe there's been a significant change in the demographics, and there are fewer people in the demographic that generally offenders fall into, which are males between roughly 16 and probably 26 years of age. I think if we looked at that number in the population now and compared it to a decade ago, a decade and a half or 2 decades, there are fewer. There are fewer in that demographic. So there's a lot that plays into this, and I think it will require some people with the expertise that have gotten into the weeds in other jurisdictions and other areas to come in and really give us an assessment so that a strategic long-term plan could be developed by you all, okay? So that you plan for how you're going to finance it, Commissioner, and over what period of time, and so on and so forth, and look at it. In the meantime, we've brought forth some short-term, temporary relief kinds of things that might free up a little cash flow for you to be able to do some of those things. If, for example, the juveniles are out of there, that's 44 cells could become 88 beds very quickly, okay? 5 additional staff people, I can staff it 24/7, 365. We know that a staff person, it costs $50,000. So for $250,000 with that space, we could immediately bring 88 back, okay? There are rooms up there about this size, or at least half or 3/4 of this size, that we could look at a configuration of dorm-style bunking for our minimum, those 30 roughly or so minimum custody people. We sent them to farm-out facilities at one time that bunked them like that on bunk beds in a big room like this where there were 20 of them or whatever. The key is, do you have the staff and the logistical support? Can you feed them? Can you medically, manage them? Do you have enough uniformed staff people to be able, to handle that? I believe in a quick walkthrough, J.E. Dunn, working with us, I think, Jeff, we identified 244 additional people we could bunk in that space if we utilized it to its full and maximum potential, okay? We wouldn't be farming anybody up at today's numbers and the trend over the last 3 years, okay? I don't know if that trend's gonna go up or go down. I think that's why you need the comprehensive consultant to come in and look at all of the factors beyond just what we're paying and what we're doing and how we're doing it, and come up with a strategic long-term permanent solution for how we do this business.
I want to I want to hear from Judge Ryan, and then I want to hear from Judge Hanson with your experience in another community, and then Mr.
Chief
Walker.
Hanson, Chief,
What'd I
you
just
make
say?
her a
Called her
judge,
judge.
Your Honor.
So, I apologize, Chief Hanson.
Well, from the city standpoint, if I could avoid putting people in jail, for the most part, I would, because most of the people that I send to jail, it's mandatory jail time, DUIs, driving on suspended, domestic battery, things like that, who are not violent offenders per se. Then you have the group that is in jail just because they never come to court, they never pay their fines, they don't care what you do or say, they're just going to do what they're going to do. The average length of stay for a city prisoner in the jail is 3 days, mainly because we see about 100 to 150 prisoners a week on video arraignment. We cycle them through really quick. We book a lot, but we cycle through them really quick, and when you consider that most of the ones that are in jail on city charges have a minimum 2-day jail sentence, we're getting them in and out about as quickly as you can get them from a city standpoint. Would I like to have, a minimum security jail? Yeah, that'd be fantastic. A juvenile jail, that'd be fantastic. But so far as us having our prisoners spend less time, that's just not going to happen because the state law doesn't allow it.
Well, I'd just like to say a couple of words about the whole issue of juveniles. If you do hire an outside consultant, I would almost guarantee you one of the things you're going to hear from them will be echoing a lot of the research that's been going on across the country that shows putting juveniles in jail is not effective. Most of them come out worse, their behaviors are worse, their problems are worse when they come out of there. So looking at alternatives on that particular front is one of the things that I think is pretty much held across the board as the wise way to go. They've done a lot of studies about why kids are in heavy detention and do they need to be there or can they be better served elsewhere, and almost exclusively the answer is yes. They have better long-term results, turning their life around, become a constructive citizen if they have a different type of incarceration.
Sounds great. Thank you. Okay, we're going to wrap up in about 10 minutes, so Commissioner Walker?
Okay. For me, the fundamental question can be reduced down to.
Can you please speak into the microphone for the broadcast? Thank you.
Okay. The fundamental question for me, and I'm going to give a little tiny speech here, is are we more concerned about the cost, or is our primary concern about the protection of the public? This isn't anything I've ever felt differently about. To me, the protection of the public is primary over what it costs. We are always driven by this cost issue. Judge Ryan, I'm going to take exception with one thing you said. Domestic violence is a crime that is every bit as severe and as meaningful as assault of two strangers getting into a fight and one of them getting the hell beat out of them. So, somebody who is in jail for domestic violence, they need to be there longer than 3 days. DUI, not showing up for court, okay, I can give you that one. But domestic violence is a serious endemic crime in this country. We spend a lot of money on domestic violence and trying to intervene and do things about it. And any spousal partner that beats on his other partner is every bit as deserving to go to jail for as long as we can keep them in there. And it shouldn't be cost-driven that we let them out just because I happen to go to a bar and I beat Mayor Holland into a pulp. Okay?
Is that a challenge, Commissioner?
I'm afraid I would lose that challenge. Now, I got to say, if I were to ask this question of District Attorney Gorman and Judge Lamson, are you telling me that you put everybody in jail that you don't want to put in, that you want to put in jail? Or does cost ever enter into your consideration because of this kind of a long-term issue? I refuse to believe that you don't put everybody in jail. I believe that there are people who belong in jail, who should be put in jail, but because they're the least of the worst, they don't ever go to jail, and we find a program for them. And you're free to answer.
Maybe it's fair that I answer first, because you might want to follow up on what I say, because we don't take cost into account when we're deciding whether to file a charge, which then which results in an arrest warrant and somebody being put in the jail. So we don't take cost into account for that. I suppose there's a number of people that get let out of jail that we object to the release, or we object to a lower bond resulting in them getting out. But this is where I'm sure Judge Lamson will want to chime in on, is that those decisions aren't necessarily ours at that point. Our decision is, do we file a warrant? Do we get them arrested? Do we initially put them in the jail? After that, it's pretty much up to the courts, and we don't always agree upon that.
To answer candidly, I don't know that we put them in, Commissioner, based on that consideration, but I let individuals out on probably a daily basis, and the cost to this body is a concern. I have one now that I'm sure Jerry in his office is going to object, but we're going to have to pay, or the sheriff's office is going to have to pay $150,000 for medical for this individual. Now, has he got a criminal record? Yes, he's been burglarizing since he was born, and he's 52 years old or something. Now, should I put him out? And if I do put him out, maybe I lock him on a machine so we can watch him. But do we want to pay $150,000 for a burglary? That's what it is. Now, he'll go to prison when he's done, but we're going to keep him for another 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 months till we get him there. And so, and I don't know.
You and I have known each other a
Correct.
long time. We've been colleagues. We've worked together. You've moved on. You're chief judge now. If you given all the jail space in the world, are you telling me you would still let out all the people you let out?
If we had jail space, all that we wanted, and it wasn't costing us anything, I'd probably lock a lot of them up more. But
So-
that doesn't mean I don't balance that against, do I think that I can put this guy out on and I'm not really putting him in a program, I'm putting him on a machine that I can tell you, I don't believe he'll go over and burglarize your house while he's on that bond. If I have the people that I'm here right here, I can tell you, I think if he leaves that house, I'll know within 5 minutes. And I can have her office running him down. I don't have to feed him, I don't have to medicate him. And I don't have to pay $150,000 medical.
So we're going to wrap this up. Do you have, Reggie, do you have budgets for each of these departments for us? Yes. What I've asked is, one of the things we need to know is we spend an enormous amount of money, rightfully so, in these departments. And so I have asked our budget director to pass out to each of the commissioners a packet tonight that shows the budget for the police, for the sheriff, for the courts, for the DA's office, so we can get a picture of how much money we're talking about that we invest on an annual basis in our criminal justice system. And I would ask you to review this, to look it over, because when we talk about saving money, and saving through innovation, the most opportunity for saving is going to come through this kind of innovation that we've talked through. We can't spend enough money. There isn't enough money to spend to fix all crime in America. So we're going to have to be thoughtful. We're going to have to be innovative, and we're the ones as the commissioners who ultimately need to see that the bills are paid, that our community is safe, and that we have the right people in jail, and in my opinion, people who don't need to be in jail, not in jail. And so finding that balance with our professional experts at the table is critical. I want to thank all of you for the work that you do each and every day on our behalf. I want to thank Commissioners Walters and McKiernan again for working on this committee. I also want to ask, is there consensus among this group that were they to bring us a cost, an estimated cost, we would obviously want to do an RFP and do a pretty comprehensive look at who would be doing the study. Is there an interest by this body to have the Jail Population Committee bring forward a proposal for a comprehensive study of our services? Is that something we would be interested in seeing?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you all, with your
No.
committee.
Oh,
Okay, well, no,
you
well,
don't
I
wanna
said
look at-
consensus. You're against it?
Everybody needs to vote. I'm saying
Okay.
no, because I already have, we pay tens of thousands, if not hundreds, for a study to tell us what we already know.
Okay, so
No,
that's
I'm
that's
a
one
no.
speech against, that's fine. I'm definitely for it, I think we need to, for it, are folks for it? Okay, I'm seeing the vast majority of folks are for it.
So Mayor, I know you're trying to end this, but just to make a comment, Hal, I hear what you're saying, but I think, aren't we gonna look over the whole, the way the jail is completely run? There might be other efficiencies in that beyond build a jail or offer programs, correct?
That's exactly right, we're talking about a
So you're
comprehensive look.
interested in that, aren't you?
I'm gonna tell you, at the end of this, you're not gonna learn one thing you don't already know.
Okay, Commissioner, are you
So I
supportive of
voted
this?
no.
All right.
Well, I just had a question about.
Can you speak into the microphone, please?
I had a question about the age of the study that Commissioner Walker said has been done, and would it take into account all of the things that have been mentioned here tonight, whether 2 additional pylons should be added to the existing structure? Should there be a new structure built entirely? Would it be that comprehensive, or was it that comprehensive?
Commissioner, the last study was done in 2005 by a group called Carter Goebel. I don't know if anybody in the commission's familiar with that group.
That predates me.
It was about, try not to quote me, I believe it was in the neighborhood of $105,000, something like
To
that.
do the study?
To do the study. And once again, I'm not exactly sure where I'm pulling that number, but I thought somebody gave me that number.
Well, I can tell you, we're looking at a $200,000 study that we funded last year for a comprehensive study of our fire operations. And so we're going to spend about $200,000 that we've already approved to do a comprehensive look at our complete fire operations. I believe, and that is a lot of money. When you look at the total budget for the fire department, it's not in this packet, but you look at the total budget of the fire department, it's a drop in the bucket, the fire bucket, get it? Drop in the bucket. It's a drop in the bucket. In terms of the total amount we spend for fire, the efficiencies we could find in the fire department with $200,000 study will definitely pay itself back. I think this kind of study, considering if you look through the pages of how much we spend on our criminal justice system, if you're looking at community corrections at $530,000, district attorney at $4.2 million, district court department $2.2 million, police department at $50 million, sheriff's department at $23.5 million. If you start looking at adding all of those up, we have an $81 million criminal justice system. And if we have an $81 million system, I think it would be worth $100,000 or $200,000 to do a comprehensive study to see how we might save a couple of $1 million. So I think it's a good move forward. I saw a consensus with the commission, though it was not, let it be noted, it was not unanimous. But I think the sooner we move forward on that kind of study, the better we can create some efficiencies. So I am ready to close the meeting. Commissioner?
I just want to say, as long as we do this study, we need to be willing to follow some of these guidelines and put into effect over a period of time.
There's no question.
Otherwise, there's no point in spending the money.
No, that's right. No sense in wasting the money.
So Mayor, I just have one last question. We're gonna allow the suggestions that were made up here, are we gonna allow them to do those?
They are putting those forward, and they will come to us through their departments in the regular budget process.
Okay, but this is what you're proposing?
This is a proposal that they're bringing forward. Is that right?
Fantastic.
And so it will come through the regular budgeting process. All right, so we have the $81 million question in terms of how we move forward. But I want to thank all of you for the work that you do on behalf of our community. Our community is a better place because of your work, and I appreciate it very much. I also want to recognize Judge Nichols is here as well. Thank you for being in attendance tonight. We are adjourned.
Nice to know.